All right, welcome back to another episode of the Royal Palace Podcast, where we discuss the aftermath of the U.S. presidential election, where Kamala Harris won resoundingly in an impressive Democratic success across the board. Should I actually do it seriously, or do you think that's too mean?
Nah, let's stick with that. I mean, got it out there.
All right. So, guys, last week we made our guesses, right? Liam and I thought that Trump had the greatest chance of success.
And Sam ate shit. Sam embarrassed himself on live podcasting.
That's right. I've humiliated myself with my very scientific and highly informed predictions. I didn't actually look, to be honest. How off am I? I think the House is still. We don't know how bad it's.
We don't know, which is great. I love that. And it doesn't seem like we'll know anytime soon. And I actually, so the House currently,
there's only 2 seats that have flipped so far. God.
Yeah, but it's just because I don't understand why there seems to be diminishing returns with counting ballots. You know what I mean? Like I've been following the Maine 2nd District one, and I feel like they were at 90% a few days ago. Now they're at 95%, and I'm just like, are the remaining ballots like difficult to reach? Are they hard to read? Like why are some ballots taking so much longer than the rest?
Accumulated fatigue.
I bet it's just less volunteers.
Probably.
It also keeps up the substance. If you're into that kind of thing, which I assume most Americans are, then you get weeks of this. And yeah, so currently the House is Democrats at 203, Republicans at 213, 218 to control. So these uncalled races are actually like so close. Like my own home district, although not where I vote, Maine 2nd District, where we have a Democratic congressman who is basically Republican for all intents and purposes. We got one of those guys. We got a Joe Manchin type. Jared Golden, for example, he was, let me see now. He was one of only 2 Democrats to vote with Republicans against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
Oh, hell yeah.
He was one of only 2 House Democrats to side with Republicans in voting to overturn President Biden's student loan debt cancellation plan.
Let's go. Jesus Christ.
He urged President Biden to send F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. He opposed calls for a ceasefire in Israel. I guess those last 2 are not that at odds with the standard Democratic position, but he's like, yeah, he voted against, just terrible. He's very anti-gun control. Again, he's like, how much different is electing this kind of guy than a Republican? But to be fair, in that district, I guess maybe it makes sense because that district has voted for Trump in all the last 3 elections.
I'm sure anyway, that election is some pure Aryan bloodlines type guy, so the way these things always are. So.
Yeah. He's some sort of psycho. I haven't really looked into him, but that they still haven't called us at 95% of votes counted and 700 vote difference.
Nice.
And we're going to ranked choice. Yeah, because in Maine we have ranked choice. So I guess that's probably what's holding it up, is that they now have to count the 1,200 write-ins and see if those people listed anyone as their second choice.
Awesome.
But so then we got Iowa, there's 206,000 to 205,000 is the current count with one of these uncalled races. It's just, they are just genuinely really, really close. So I guess the Democrats still could eke it out, but who knows? Hopefully we never know.
Well, the interesting is if the Democrats do retain or do obtain, right? Because they didn't have the House before.
They did not have the House. They had the Senate. They've lost the Senate.
That's right.
And if they win the House, I think that would be one of the only times that's ever happened.
That would be absurd.
You lose one chamber and win the other. It would also be one of the only times that that the House is under the control of one party for only 2 years. I really do hope it happens. One, because that would be very, very funny.
Yeah, and like that good trivia little stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I go to a rather difficult pub quiz most Thursdays, and something like that would definitely be on there. But then secondly, I think you guys probably agree that even though we're no fans of the Democrats, it would probably be better for Republicans not to hold all 3 chambers of government.
In theory, I think I have a healthy skepticism as to how much it could actually mean, because we know how Democrats are. They're going to immediately start trying to work on the bills that cross the aisles? What are the chances that they're just going to give up and give the Republicans practically everything they want? I mean, they already tried to do that when they controlled the House. Remember the border bill?
Yes, but with this Republican Party in control of everything, they do have some really insane ideas, and they have purged most of the quote-unquote moderates at this point. And so I do think having a little check there to stop them from doing some of the most insane things would be good. But they might stop themselves from doing that, because remember, the past 2 years of the House has been maybe the most dysfunctional House ever, with a Republican
Speaker
majority.
Mike Johnson can't whip them all in the line.
So we can just hope that they'll sort of have a similar situation again and run through 30 speakers in the next 2 years or something.
Presumably it won't matter, because the main action will be the Supreme Court abolishing the events of the 20th century, regardless of
but let's
what
not,
happens. So.
They do have a legislative agenda, and if they get them, they're probably going to get a majority here, but it's going to be a very, very slim majority. And yeah, let's just hope they eat themselves.
They are good at tripping over their own shoelaces, but yeah.
Yeah, I obviously hope the Democrats manage to get the House. That'd be awesome. I just think in this moment of supposed Democratic reckoning, might be worth thinking about what it means if you actually get the House. Like, what can you actually do to stop the Republican project, as opposed to figuring out what you can do to try and make the House work by working with Republicans.
Did you know Debbie Wasserman Schultz is in the House?
Yeah, hers was one of the first districts to be called, actually.
That is exciting. Was she in the House before, or is this a new thing?
No, she's been in for years and years.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just remember
she's in one of the safest seats in Florida, which, boy, the Florida Democrats have done an outstanding job down there, gotta say. But, yeah.
Nancy Pelosi overwhelmingly run re-election. I thought she was retiring. She's just retiring as a speaker.
Yeah, she's still hanging around.
Forced to retire as speaker. She's 84.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Gerontocracy is great. It worked well for Biden. It's going to keep working well.
But the people of San Francisco would ever love her, because she got over 80% of the vote. 81%.
I thought we could talk a little bit about why this happened, but also why everyone else is saying it's happening. To our listeners, you heard it first on the Royal Palace podcast that we thought, at least as a majority, that Trump would win, which I think gives us more credibility than Pod Save America.
You also, I assume, heard it first on the Royal Palace podcast that Trump did win. I hope that our loyal listeners were waiting for us to confirm that before believing it.
Yeah, we counted the votes.
Yeah, presumably news of this result hadn't reached any of our fans in Europe yet, who are still waiting for the mail ship to cross the Atlantic.
So, Sam, what are the sort of common narratives you're hearing about why this catastrophic failure on the part of the Democrats happened?
Well, to be honest, I'm trying not to hear too many narratives, but you see all the familiar scapegoats of whatever liberal or left-wing causes your favorite pundits didn't like before were the main problems. Maybe if we'd been meaner to trans people, or deported more people, or hadn't had so many pink-haired consultants involved in our campaign.
They are also eating each other alive. Did you see that Nancy Pelosi is now saying that Biden should have dropped out sooner and it's his fault? And the Pod Save America boys also said that. It is true, but there's no... I mean, come on, Nancy Pelosi, surely she could have done something. Stop pretending like she had no influence over that decision.
Part of the reason Harris lost this election is because we didn't get the opportunity to have a primary. So she didn't get the legitimacy of a primary process. I find that kind of just procedural BS. I mean, Democrats didn't have a primary until, the 70s?
I do actually agree with that. I do agree with that, because she wouldn't have won a primary. And presumably a candidate that people actually liked would have won a primary.
Who would have been the other options?
I have no idea. Probably Gavin Newsom or someone.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom.
But I agree about sort of tarnishing all these people with the same brush politically. Gavin Newsom is just as bad as Harris, but
better campaigner.
And the elections are not, the presidential election is not mainly about policy, because there's no candidate who would have been the nominee who would have really made much deal about policy. It's about who people like and campaigning well and stuff. And Kamala just proved to be very, very bad at that. And the Democratic Party does have people who are better at that.
If I can interject, no, the biggest thing and the reason it would have been helpful is it would have introduced a clear break for a candidate to establish an identity independent of the Biden administration, which is deeply unpopular as an administration and him deeply unpopular as an individual. And this was the biggest problem. So, because it was astonishing, the surge in polling and support that Harris did have just for not being Joe Biden for those first couple weeks. And what whittled that down was that the campaign was, had all these Biden and Clinton people at the helm that rapidly steered it back into continuity with this unpopular administration. And
even if it didn't,
when asked how she would be different from the Biden administration, she systematically refused to break with him at all. And that
she said that when she was asked that directly, she said, "I can't anything that you do differently." She said, "I can't think of anything." But even if she had campaigned against him, it wouldn't have been very convincing, given that she is part of that administration.
That is true. That is
the goddamn vice president. So they needed someone who was separate from that administration. And Patrick,
I agree with all that.
Primaries.
Yeah.
The thing you said about primaries is like, I think we shouldn't analyze party primaries in the U.S. as a tool for the parties to make themselves more democratic. I think they serve an actual function for those parties, which is figuring out who the public likes as a candidate. Like that's the purpose of them, and that's an important purpose that they serve for the party, because it's very clear that people at the top of the party are completely incapable of knowing who voters like. Like, they're just so out of touch that they don't analyze personalities in the same way that normal human beings do. So I think they really need the primaries, even though that's only a small subset of the total population who actually votes in those. They need it to give some sort of vetting of like, look, we've lined up 10 cretins. Can you tell us which one of these passes for human most convincingly? And we know Harris wouldn't have done well in that because she did abysmally in that in 2020. Like, Pete Buttigieg did much better. Who is that horrible woman from the Midwest? Karen
Klobuchar?
Yeah, Klobuchar. Yeah. She did better than that. Like lots of people that I find distasteful and uncharismatic thrashed her.
And it wasn't close.
It wasn't close at all.
Well,
so that's what they should have done differently is have a primary.
Well, I obviously agree with you guys. If we look at the Democratic Party as this institution that we criticize, because it has quite a lot of flaws, sort of boiling down our explanation as to why Harris lost this election to just, they procedurally didn't do a primary. The only thing that stops the Democratic Party from appointing someone who has a higher chance of winning is themselves.
You're missing my point. I'm saying that they stopped doing that, not to make it more democratic, but because they do much worse if they appoint someone, because they don't have that input. Like, think of that like political science-ily. They need some sort of proxy for the public vote, for their base, to find out who the base likes as a personality. Because primaries have never been about,
but for example,
Bernie, primaries were never about issues. They were about
They could have just appointed, like,
face.
I don't think this is true, but if you think that the Democratic Party really wanted to win this election, and I think I have a lot to critique about Bernie, but I think he would have had a much more solid chance than Harris at winning this election. They could have, just as undemocratically as they picked Harris, they could have picked Bernie Sanders.
I think that there's a good chance that a big part of the reason this whole thing happened with Biden dropping out so late, and not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's a chance that the whole thing was orchestrated to avoid having a primary because they were worried about Bernie or, I don't know, AOC or someone else winning it. But again, I think they shot themselves in the foot because they ended up having to choose her. Like, remember when there's some talk of like, immediately when Biden was like gonna drop out, there was a bunch of talk in the media about like, who's going to replace him? And it was all names like Gavin Newsom. And no one was saying Harris initially, but I guess they kind of realized that just...
There was
we needed someone to orchestrate it. It needed someone to orchestrate it, and like in a really aggressive way, and a contested convention, and they just couldn't figure it out. Presumably there was no strong enough organizing figure to do it. And I'm sure that anyone who wanted to be in that position, like Newsom, figured that they'd be better off biding their time another 4 years.
Keep their powder dry.
Yeah.
It'll be
continuing to oppress
presumably,
the great state of California.
assuming that we still have, elections that are relatively competitive in 2020, by an American measure of relatively competitive, probably be an easy one because once these guys have been in power for a couple of years, everybody hates them. So
Right, and the good news for Democrats, I feel like, it's hard to know what's going to happen in 4 years, but the Republicans, their biggest weakness is they have no one who isn't Trump, who people like. Like they've found no one who can appeal to people the same way Trump did. I think
it's
some
pretty
people
impressive
thought that
in
J.D.
this
Vance
election.
was that, but
oh god.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty
But it's
impressive
not,
in this
I mean.
election how many candidates, how many Republican Senate candidates especially ran pretty dramatically behind Donald Trump in a lot of states that he carried,
Mhm.
whether it's Kerry Lake in Arizona or whatever. Like, yeah, it's just, it doesn't really matter how hard you try to tap into that brand. Like, those guys like Trump,
Right. And there's definitely, presumably there's someone else in the country who can do what Trump can, but they haven't found him. They have 4 years to roam the country like they're searching for new Dalai Lama and and try to find someone who can tap into this. And I don't believe they can do it. But
I do agree
maybe
with
maybe the court will just rule that term limits are unconstitutional, and we'll have President Trump until well into his 90s.
If he wants it, they will. I mean, frankly.
It's possible. It's plausible.
I want to emphasize again that, because we're being very mean to Harris here, and some of our listeners may not agree with that, I want to emphasize that, no, you should be mean to Harris. She lost this election. And you'll notice I avoid saying her first name because I still get confused about the correct way to pronounce it. It's
Now
one
you
of
don't
those
need to
things.
know. Never
Yeah,
need to know.
so there's no point wasting any more brain power, so I'll just keep saying Harris. But Trump, so the latest vote tallies, which aren't, it's at like 95% counted according to Wikipedia, so that's not everyone, but they're saying Trump 74.7 million votes. That is only less than 500,000, 300,000 votes more than he got last time around.
First
So-
time Republicans have won the
Sorry.
popular vote since 2004.
Sorry, it is 500,000. I did my math wrong. It's 500,000 more. But yes, first time. But again, a very, very minor change. Like, that's a blip. 500,000 people in the context of presidential election.
Yeah.
That's a blip. It's basically like everyone who voted for him last time voted for him this time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Harris got 71 million, which is a full 10 million votes less than Biden got. So Trump basically did the same as last election, where he lost, and lost, fairly badly. I guess it was pretty close, but he only got 46.8% of the vote. This time he's got 50.5% of the vote with basically the same amount of votes. So what happened is not that Trump did substantially better. It's that the Democratic candidate, Harris, lost 10 million votes. And those people didn't vote for Trump. They didn't vote. They just didn't vote. Or they left their ballot blank, or they voted for Jill Stein or whatever. Whose fault it really is, by the way. I do think Jill Stein
Yeah, if it wasn't
should
for
be
Jill,
crucified.
how many votes did she get? Did she even get it? 500,000?
Let me
I
see.
didn't see anywhere where it mattered. Like, I was looking at this because people were saying on Twitter, I couldn't find any state where all her votes going to the Democrat would have,
It's
because you can't just add the total.
0.4% nationally, apparently.
Yeah,
So
she
something
got
like
680,000.
680,000.
Yeah. So if you add that to what Kamala got, you still do not get 10 million.
Yeah, I don't
More
think there was a
votes.
single, like you were saying, not a single state where third-party votes would have actually flipped the outcome.
No.
Yeah, RFK actually got almost as many votes as her, which is interesting because didn't he drop out?
He was really trying to get his name taken off the ballot and was being sued by Democrats to keep him on the ballot in many states, actually. It was very funny.
That's very
Um,
fun. I didn't hear that.
Yeah, because obviously he was not taking votes away, as was originally feared absurdly that he would take votes away from Democrats. And from day one, I'm like, he is not taking votes away from Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. He's taking votes
Yeah.
away from Donald Trump.
I
Not
want
many.
to throw out
in the end, but-
I want to throw out another reason that I think that Harris lost, and this comes to us from the New York Times. I was reading their blog on election night, and their blog was run by Ross Douthat and Ezra Klein.
Wonderful.
Friend
And
of the pod.
for anyone listening who doesn't know who these people are, count yourself blessed. These are two of the stupidest men in America. Ezra Klein is like the worst type of liberal. Just like, God, I don't even know what to say about him. One of the founders of Vox. Vox Media and also Vox, the far-right political party in Spain, which are affiliated. And Ross Douthat is a weird freak of a Republican who is like an anti-Trump Republican, which is why the
worst
New York
people out there,
Times,
to be honest.
yeah, and a demographic that is only represented, albeit heavily, on the New York Times.
Can I interject? I want to give myself a little credit and the state of Maryland a little credit for keeping Larry Hogan out of the Senate, so you don't have to hear about our maverick anti-Trump Republican senator, because that would have just been insufferable. Like, we spared you guys. It was going to be.
There was no way that was happening, but I'm sure Ross Douthat would have loved it. But yeah, God, Ross Douthat, I think he's like a Catholic convert or something.
Oh, Jesus.
Real weirdo. Anyway, they had one of their blog posts was titled, Kamala Harris should have gone on Joe Rogan's show. And
oh, Lord.
I think they're right, but they got the show wrong.
She should have gone on our show.
Should have gone on the Royal Palace podcast, and that would have convinced me. I mean,
yeah, but she didn't want to talk about the real issues,
like France and French law.
She was worried we would ask her, "Hey, we have universal health care here. Why can't we do that in the U.S.?"
She wasn't prepared to talk about the aggressive fish question and under French jurisprudence.
Yeah, Ezra Klein says she should have gone on Rogan and much else besides. I agree. She should have. Yeah. But that is funny that Trump really did do the rounds of podcasts, again, except ours for some reason. I kept emailing him. But he did Joe Rogan. He did tons of other podcasts that are exactly like that I hadn't heard of until he was on them, but apparently are like listened to by hundreds of millions of people. Like the one with that guy from Louisiana.
That is one of the explanations I keep seeing regurgitated is we need liberal Joe Rogan. We need a liberal media environment that mirrors the right wing. And it's just so insane. First of all, it's just cheap to blame a messaging issue on instead of a fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, and again, there's no evidence that I've seen that Trump actually picked up a ton of non-voter Joe Rogan listeners or whatever.
But the main thing is it's obvious this won't work just because your politics are such that it's just not something that could ever attract an audience like that. There's no shortage of liberal podcasts out there.
They're just really bad.
They just will never attract a mass following because it's just not something that excites normal people.
And if they do, the people already know who they're voting for. I mean,
right.
And also, she would have been destroyed on Joe Rogan, right?
Joe Rogan's listeners are obviously like overwhelmingly not really political, or they're political in a really like esoteric sense that doesn't like. I think everyone is kind of political. Everyone has political ideas. And obviously, Rogan and his people have a lot of political ideas. It just doesn't match up at all with like American electoralism. So most of the people are just non-voters who don't even pay attention. And clearly, that's why Trump was focusing on that. Very smart move, probably by his campaign staff, to try to reach out to people who don't vote. That's a lot easier than reaching out to people who normally vote a lot, but for the opposite party. But I doubt it really. I really doubt that worked. I don't see any evidence that he really substantially increased his base. And so I don't know what the Democrats could do that would be like that. Like, I don't think Joe Rogan is I don't think his listenership is like a Republicans per se. I don't think it's radicalizing people to become right wing. It's radicalizing people to become stupider. That's for sure. But
yeah,
like it's just.
But it's not just
garbage, dude.
It's
like, I don't want to play too much into their argument on this, but if there's any truth to it, Kamala's not the person to do it. Right? Like, Kamala is not the person who does well in these hostile environments. It's kind of like Mélenchon in France, right? Mélenchon, you put him on the most conservative news channel. I don't know if he's picking up any votes doing this, but he will at least come out, despite all the cards being not in his favor, he'll at least come out as having defended his political project in a somewhat convincing way. We saw the same thing with Bernie Sanders when he went on Joe Rogan's show. We saw the same thing when Bernie Sanders went on Fox News. Remember, he did the weird Fox News town hall thing. Like, do I think those were victories? No, but I mean, he survived. And I don't think that's true with anyone like Harris.
Yeah.
Maybe Biden, when he still had the wits about him, could have survived something like this. But I mean, just somebody whose answer to everything is, "Oh, I agree with you." I mean, it would have been worse if it was what's his face, the vice president, or Hope
JD Vance.
No, Harris is hopeful.
Oh, sorry. Walls.
Yeah, remember him during the debate? Right?
Another name I never learned how to pronounce properly.
All he was doing was be like, no, we agree that we should do draconian immigration policy. We just think it needs a suit and tie where the tie stops at the belt buckle, unlike you, Mr. Trump.
I mean, when you bring up Mélenchon and French debating styles, it's interesting because I don't think there's any American candidate or politician who could survive in that kind of media environment. And they don't have to because the U.S. doesn't have that kind of media environment. Like, again, for American listeners who have never seen a French political debate on TV, it's just chaos. It's just like, and you sort of, everyone has to go through this. Macron doesn't anymore because he just like refuses to participate, but he did when he was running. You have to go on there and have a bunch of people yell at you all talking at the same time. It's like a headache to watch these things. And of course, they're easier on liberal and right-wing politicians because the media has that bias, but it's still like aggressive, whoever you are. And so everyone has to have a certain amount of acuity to deal with that. And that's just not something that like American politicians need. So you ask me like which American politician, which Democratic politician could handle that. I don't know. Never seen any of them do it. They've never have to. It's not something they're trained for. Presumably that is something you prep for if you're a French politician. And that's why you rise to the top as a French politician, because you're good at that. Whereas in the US, I don't know actually how they pick people.
And
well, you're good at like,
Liam a minute ago alluded to the other major tactical misstep of the campaign, which was the obsessive compulsion focus in the last couple weeks on like swing voters, marginal Republicans, the Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley type people that just are not a meaningful proportion of the population, even if you believe you're going to win all of them, which, let's be honest, these are people who at the end of the day are still Republicans and so selfish that they're going to probably just vote for Trump based on their marginal tax bill. All of them, it's nobody, it's nothing, and pursuing them actively demobilizes your base. It just drives me crazy.
This has been proven 3 elections in a row now, that even though there's several very high-profile anti-Trump Republicans, like Ross Douthat, that those people's audience is entirely Democratic, who like the idea of there being moderate Republicans. Yeah, obviously, those people, that the Republicans are not subscribing to the New York Times or the Lincoln Project's crap. And this has been proven again and again the past 3 elections. There's no doubt that no matter how distasteful people find Trump, registered Republicans, 95% vote for the registered Republican candidate.
Beyond trying to get the middle voter, the attempts the Democrats have made to get the further right voter have just baffled me. I think we saw this on every single issue. Abortion, they avoided it. I watched a campaign rally of Harris's 2 days before the election, and she was like, we're going to protect abortion rights. Here's how I'm going to do it. And it was a marginal part of her whole speech. But she said, when Congress passes a law when I'm president, I will proudly sign. That's it. Completely ignoring the abortion issue. On immigration, she's run completely to the right, as I think we talked about on our last episode.
Yeah.
Healthcare, completely on the right. She's not advocating for even like a really watered down version of Medicare for all. And I can't imagine who this is attracting. If you hate immigrants, why would you not just vote Trump? If you don't want if you're not that excited about the abortion issue, well, you don't have Harris to believe in, and Trump says he doesn't care that much about it. So I just don't know who this is supposed to attract.
Yeah. No, it's like Liam said on our pre-election episode, it's just, imagine if Democrats would run on something, anything. There was just barely an attempt at having a platform here, and it's just no identifiable policies that people can point to, Nothing that differs from the status quo, and really no counter-argument at all to what Republicans are talking about. And that's it's no wonder that people didn't turn out. And given also, because we haven't remarked on it, but it is obvious that there was just an overall atmosphere that was going to be difficult for the incumbent party, because that has been the case in a lot of places, and people are obviously dissatisfied with inflation and I guess would rather see 10% unemployment instead, but whatever. Knowing that, there needed to be something on the table, and even the vague gestures were... It was nothing that I feel like a median voter, if you interviewed them, just could not tell you what the Harris campaign was supposedly standing on. You know?
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
could
right.
have been
All
really
these people who were going on and on about how great Harris was, I just couldn't figure it out. What are you talking about? Like not even to say anything negative about her, but like, what is the positive thing? And the only thing I heard of is she's very qualified. She's very
They love
competent.
Well, that's what we heard about
She's a
Hillary
senator,
Clinton,
she's been
right?
Attorney General.
That's what we heard about Hillary
Yeah, right.
Clinton
Exactly.
as well.
It was not as bad as Clinton because Clinton sort of ran the platform of I deserve this, and I didn't really get that vibe from Harris. But the parallels are striking, including like the detail. Did you see this, Patrick? That Harris didn't speak to her supporters at Howard
Yes.
Howard University on campaign night, which is exactly the same thing that Clinton did. Right? It's just be like which is. I mean, who cares? It's a minor thing, but just like.
It's telling,
Goddamn
though.
coward. It's telling, yeah.
So I'm going to come out and say I did not vote for Harris, and I absolutely did not vote for Donald Trump. I want to be clear. But I got to say, guys, I see no reason why I should vote for Harris, and I especially find the whole competency argument very frustrating, especially with Hillary Clinton, because I don't think I like what you guys do with your when you're competent, right? Like, if I look at the supposedly competent Biden White House, I see you got me into 2 wars that I had no desire to be involved with. And meanwhile, the Orange Man, yeah, he played around with Iran, I guess, but he ultimately didn't do anything. Probably because people realized he wasn't competent enough to pull it off. And I don't know. So it's just, for me, the competency argument just doesn't work.
No, I've long maintained that my ideal situation for the American government is gridlock. That's sort of because there's sort of no one wants to do anything good in the American government, right? So the best we can hope for is that the people who want to do bad things, which is a lot of people in the American government, can't do it because the institutions are so ossified that nothing can get through, which I'm worried might not be the case this time.
But that's also the problem with the courts. That's why I think I don't want to say a blunder because I feel like it was intentional, but I think it was a blunder to not do anything under the Biden administration about the Supreme Court issue, because that is the one institution that can, I can't believe that we're in this world, but that can actually push policy regardless of public opinion.
I really don't understand why they didn't do
opposite of
anything. Right. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't do anything. Like, I don't want to say that the Inflation Reduction Act was a major thing they did. But...
Oh, I thought you were talking about the court. Because if that's
no, just in general. I know they did nothing on the court, but like, I don't want to say the Biden administration did nothing. I think the Inflation Reduction Act was a very major thing they did. I'm not completely convinced that it was a particularly great thing they did.
If you want to see Germany deindustrialized, it was wonderful. So,
which obviously we do. That is the position of this podcast.
We do not like Daimler,
and I know your position as well, Sam.
Yes,
but on anything that really, I don't really think that like matters to people. I don't think that normal voters really know about that or care about that, even though it's a very important issue for like economists and media elite. And it clearly didn't do enough to like improve the economic situation that most people feel. Again, people can yell at me and say, but the economic situation in the US is great. Again, it's clearly that's which is such a stupid talking point, right? Because it's like they point to GDP figures and unemployment figures and then say like the problem is people's perception caused by right-wing media. That's been a huge Democratic talking point, is that the economy is great, but the right-wing media is fooling people into thinking the economy is terrible. I think that's obviously the right-wing media is having a very negative effect for Democrats. But I think the main thing is that is an insanely like narrow view of the economy.
Right.
Like this is the
you have a
only
lot of
possible
measures
opinion.
of precarity. You have measures of child poverty. You have measures of food insecurity, of eviction rates, other indicators that are not very rosy right now. Like you could say that, yes, at an overall macroeconomic level, sure, there is growth, unemployment is down, whatever. But for a significant segment of the population, like there is obvious and very real hardship, and there is no willingness to acknowledge that.
And throwback to what we talked about on our summer vacation episode, but also a bit on our first part of the Fall of France episode. The Popular Front, the leftist government that France had before its fall. Check out that series if you haven't already. They moved, despite poor economic conditions on things like mandatory vacation for workers, because those are part of economics. So
That's
even
part
if
of the
it's not,
economy. Exactly.
even if it's not about maximizing growth or whatever the economists are interested in, this is what people want. They want vacation. They know that when they're an Uber driver, they get none of it. And the fact that
That's
the
my point.
Democrats don't acknowledge that is not only a losing strategy, but it's absurd. I mean, I don't care if the richest people in the U.S. are doing well. It just doesn't matter to me.
Right. And my opinion on the U.S. economy has little to do with what any indicators are saying, because my opinion on the U.S. economy always is that it is structured in a very unfair way, which is that a very small minority of people control it. And like that's sort of left out of the realm of like a political position you could have on the economy. Anything about the economy other than just like, oh, I want to see what the numbers say, or even that it could like, you know, even the idea that a voter could have a bad perception of the economy and how it works, and even though they personally are doing well, like that's left out of it, right? They're like, but everyone's incomes are rising, everyone's real income, or like the majority of the country's real incomes are rising, and yet the majority of the country says that the economy is bad. Well, is it not possible that, you know, I'm doing great, the podcast industry is booming. We're
not, by the way,
the money with this show. No, we're not. We're losing.
You're actively losing money.
Yes, but right. Even if that were the case, I could still have the opinion that the economy is bad, and this is a bad way to do the economy. But anyway, my point is, so the Biden administration didn't address that in a way that benefited them. They also didn't attempt to touch the other issues that people clearly care about, the Supreme Court, as you said, and then abortion. I mean, again, I have not been following American politics super closely for the past 4 years, but I heard nothing about any substantial effort by the federal government, controlled by Democrats for the first 2 years completely, and then later, you know, they still controlled the Senate and the White House. I didn't hear anything about them trying to protect abortion rights on a national level. Did you guys? Did they do anything about that?
No,
even though that's clearly a very important issue to people and something that they keep running on.
No, they've just repeated over and over and over again about how their solution to this problem is legislation.
But they didn't do what legislation? What did they do?
No, because they couldn't, Liam, because they didn't have the Senate. Don't you understand? Or they didn't have the House. Sorry, they didn't have the House.
Yeah, but they did have the House before that, right? They had the House in 2020.
Oh, yeah, but that was... We were picking up the mess of COVID.
Then the excuse was that there were people,
Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema.
Right. Which again makes, if that's the excuse, then that makes me really scratch my head about the vote blue no matter who thing. Well, clearly it does matter who, right? Because we have a bunch of... Right, but it's just, I mean, they didn't do it. They haven't done anything. Like why were people supposed to vote for them? I'm just thinking about their own self-preservation here. Like, why wouldn't they do these things?
Well, to do anything would be to appear radical and risk alienating the prized 2% of centrist swing voters that we treasure above all in Democratic Party calculations. So
perhaps we should move on to what we think we will see under this new Trump 2.0.
Right.
Perhaps we should start with the Ukraine war.
Yeah. There's a rumor going around Twitter, and I have to find the name of this guy. Do you remember this, Sam? Have you seen this? Of who his Secretary of State is going to be?
Oh, I saw that going around. I already forgot the name. Yeah,
I did too, so I want to pull this up.
But it's basically someone of the fairly typical neocon current, right? Like, not one of the big names from last time around, but somebody who was still involved last time. And
Great.
Was presumably
really
involved. Someone who was involved in the Trump... Do we get to do Trump 1 now? Like French governments, you know? Like, now we have Trump 1 and Trump 2. But yeah, in Trump 1's turning up the heat on Iran and on Venezuela. We forget a lot, but I mean, we really got things cooking in Venezuela back in 2019, 2020. So, yeah.
Well, if you believe the Venezuelan media, I'm not saying I do, but if you believe the Venezuelan media, they were very involved under Biden.
Well.
But look, a big part of the reason for the change in policy towards Venezuela has been broader geopolitical issues, which is that
that's right.
People wanted their oil. Suddenly, that became very important since everyone's trying to pretend they're not sourcing Russian oil. And so I think that was sort of more the reason than anything ideological.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much right-wing versus liberal ideology plays into this sort of foreign policy. Like, under Obama, you definitely had there being a difference, which was not having the ideological hate towards Cuba and Iran that Republicans have. But I no longer see a difference on either of those questions from Democrats. Like, this is something the Democratic Party has moved well right on since the Obama years. So now it's like, sure, they might, we'll see if they have a anti-Iran or anti-Venezuela crusade again.
I suspect we will, given the bear hug of Israel is going to, I mean, not to say that, electing Kamala Harris was going to improve the situation, which was already apocalyptic for everyone living in that region. Like, I want to make it clear. But, like, it is, there will be absolutely no incentive on the side of Israel to slow down. And, it's a blank check. And there's so many people in and around the Trump administration that are very openly desirous of full-scale open conflict with Iran and regime change in Iran. And so that is my greatest point of concern with this government.
Mine as well. As for the Russia-Ukraine thing, again, there's this rumor that there's going to be this very hawkish on Russia guy coming in. I wonder if the Trump admin taking that position would cause them some issues in the House and the Senate, because I do believe that some of these people in the House, some of these like Republican mavericks, are actually anti that war, whether it's because they actually just like the Russian government and think America should be a bit more like that.
Which
or
seems to be J.D. Vance's position, right?
Yeah. So I think that could be cause some interesting issues, because it is a clearly big latent divide within the party. Like, I think that many of the people who were attacking Biden about Ukraine from the right are just opportunists and are actually, now that it's a Trump administration, they're actually totally fine with sending another $60 billion to Ukraine. But I do believe that there are some people who are actually against that because they think that money should be, cut from the budget or spent on police or whatever vile thing they think. But we'll see. One good thing about Republicans is they have not historically been that good at putting aside their internal divides.
Right.
But we'll see. But speaking of J.D. Vance, here's something relevant to the podcast that J.D. Vance said recently. You'll like this, Patrick. He said, this is before the election, but I just saw this today. He said that the U.S. should drop support for NATO if Europe tries to regulate Elon Musk's platforms.
Well, my only advice to Europe is let's get regulating, boys.
Yeah. Get cracking.
Yeah.
One other foreign policy point that I haven't seen come up, even though it was a very big topic during the Republican primary that we had for some reason, is Mexico. And
invading Mexico.
Basically every candidate on the Republican primary debate stage was in favor of some degree of military intervention in Mexico. Obviously, in Mexico, we have now re-elected with a strong majority, a left-wing government that has a complicated relationship with the American government, right?
What a surprising... I think the Mexicans have, despite it sometimes bothering me, they have found a relatively acceptable equilibrium or balance with the Americans. Like, they have not made the fatal mistakes of other left-wing governments in Latin America, and for better or for worse, the party has done a lot to consolidate its power within the country, which I think is a meaningful.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
It prevents the United States from just being able to boss it around like it has for a very long time.
It'll be interesting to see if Claudia Sheinbaum has a different take on this than AMLO did.
Yeah.
Because, AMLO, as you alluded to,
there was some very interesting compromise, and especially on immigration issues, the way that the Mexican government and its armed forces have intervened on behalf of the U.S.
That's one of the only cards that they hold, kind of like
exactly.
Turkey does for the European Union. It is a pretty powerful bargaining chip to be able to, look, if we stop controlling immigration, you're going to have a much bigger problem. And Mexico has an immigration situation of its own, which I think
Right.
people don't really hear about this in the U.S., but most immigrants crossing the border from Mexico are not Mexicans. The vast majority are not
Right.
Mexicans. They are Central Americans, and now even more like Haitians and Cubans and people from a more diverse area who have flown into Central America and come up. And Mexico has a big issue with these people. A lot of racism towards them in Mexico. A lot of issue with processing them in Mexico. Like that's a whole another step that these people have to pass through before they get to the American border.
Yeah. But one of the problems Mexico has always had, and the U.S. has had a big part in this, is that the central government has never been the successfully centralized state à la France. They've always relied. I mean, it's a federation, and one of the issues has always been that state power, like centralized state power, doesn't reach the extremities of the country. I mean, to this day, there are still territories that are effectively autonomous from Mexico,
Right.
completely autonomous from the government. But AMLO made it a big part of his political program to centralize, especially the monopoly of violence, into the national government. And he's made, once again, you can criticize it, but he's made inroads in reducing territory held by leftist guerrillas. So I think in the long term, that strategy will, if well yielded, will benefit the Mexican government and the Mexican state from having to sort of just bow down to anything the U.S. wants. I mean, they have to bow down to most of it, but it certainly isn't the old dynamics of Mexico sort of being an entirely malleable state from the American perspective.
Right, but I do wonder if we are going to inevitably see, as a result of the Republican braying over immigration, over crime, over drugs, especially if they need to deflect from either domestic stagnation or foreign policy failures, is it inevitable that we see some sort of intensification of violence in Mexico fueled by U.S. intervention, whether that's in the form of some sort of military action or special forces or just arms flows, or just, pressure on Mexico to intensify the internal anti-drug campaign? I wonder whether that, and what the impact of that would be.
All I can say is, God, I hope not. Mexico is a country that has suffered too much already, mostly at American hands, like all of Latin America.
I also feel like these are really
this is
just Republican. They like stoking the fire on things,
maybe, probably, but
especially when it's not them in power. And I think,
right.
Sam, I see what you're saying, where it could go both ways, where they get embarrassed of something and then react in this insane way. But they might also just shift the narrative away from it, because it's like, well, no. Now, I mean, it's like with the border wall. There's a quote from Barack Obama in 2011 where he says, look, we basically built the border wall. We built the fence, right? But that didn't stop Trump from claiming that, A, there was no border wall, B, that he would build it, and that now he's just kind of assumed to have built it. And yet nothing's really changed. The border wall didn't grow that much under Trump. So, they do control a lot of the narrative, and I think they don't want to be in a losing position. Like, that's why I'm a little bit more skeptical about what you guys say on Ukraine, and a little bit on Israel, but not really. Which is that I don't think Trump wants to be the loser. He knows these wars never win.
Well, I don't think he cares. I think it's a mistake to worry too much about Trump and his personal position on anything.
I agree.
I think he's more tuned out than he's ever been. I think he'll be barely involved in decision making, if at all.
I mean, I generally agree, but that doesn't stop him from, just on an idea being like, hey guys, let's shut down this Ukraine war.
I really don't know. I kind of suspect that he will not be yielding any real power in this. I think it's going to be Reagan 2 crossed with what we've seen in the last 4 years, where we don't yet know who's actually going to be wielding power in this administration, but I can almost promise you that I think Donald Trump will be only marginally involved, if at all, personally.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's going to say that about Ukraine, and they'll say, yes, sir. And then nothing's going to really change, probably. I agree. These decisions are being made elsewhere. We don't know who's making them. that's the question: is who's going to make those decisions, and who's going to make the decisions about who makes those decisions, and we just don't know. It's but Patrick, I wouldn't overlook that. There's a lot of lunatics, like actual lunatics, in the Republican Party. And I think that these people could have a lot of power, and they could do almost anything. And that's what's scary. And we don't know. And this is what's always sort of scary about the U.S. is it could invade Mexico if it wanted, right? Like that's within the power of the U.S. Most countries, you don't have to worry. Oh, a crazy guy's in charge of Hungary. Okay. You know, what are they going to do, right? But the U.S., it's like they could do anything, and you never know. Both with Republican and Democratic administrations, you don't know what they're going to do in terms of foreign policy, and they can do a lot of damage, and they do a lot of damage. The Biden admin did a lot of damage to the world, and this Trump admin could easily, like luckily, and I think it was mostly that, luckily, the previous Trump admin didn't actually do that much damage to that world. But this one, I think, could easily... It could easily, maybe that could happen again for whatever reason. They don't do anything, or it could be way worse.
One more key domain we have to talk about there is one thing that they absolutely will do, because it's what they've been promising to do, is continue to intensify and ratchet up tensions with China in a very purposeful and intentional way.
But again, it's not like the Biden administration wasn't also doing that.
But now
unfortunately, these worst things is pretty bipartisan. The Biden admin has been one of the worst on foreign policy for a long time. I was about to say for decades, but now that I think about that, obviously, Obama was really bad and Bush was really bad.
Bush was really terrible too. Right, and remember,
Bush was worse.
Everybody remembers how fucking stupid and insane Bush was, and he did a lot of damage.
Yeah, right. That's obviously worst case scenario is Bush again, because that was really just like a bunch of lunatics undertook 2 ground invasions that wouldn't have otherwise happened, right?
But if we had voted Harris,
like the China confrontation, this is
again. Remember Cheney?
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. No, I agree. That I think it is a very disturbing thing that's happened to the Democratic Party is that a lot of the Bush era and Reagan era neocons have gone towards the Democratic Party, but the Republican Party still has tons of them too. So we'll see.
For sure.
Who knows? But maybe to end things, let me bring up, I think the worst person that we already know is going to be in the administration, which is Elon Musk, who has been promised the Doge department, or whatever it's called, that's the worst part of that, clearly, is that they would call it that. The Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. Like, oh, God.
I don't know. I've got to be honest, and it's hard, but I do think that we are going to see an increased level of internal repression, because I think we already were getting hints of it at the tail end of the Trump administration during the George Floyd protests, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where left-wing groups were the most organized and visible and present. Of people being bundled off, of federal law enforcement being involved. I don't know. I do think that, and it's marginal. It's never easy to be critical in the U.S. and it's hard to be, engaged, especially if you are someone who subscribes as, if you're some sort of anarchist or whatever, and your kind of political motivation is linked to, a theory of violence, effectively. But I don't know. I think we're gonna see something spooky there. I feel like I know that exists regardless of who's in power, but I do think that there is a greater willingness and desire to crack down on internal enemies when these guys come in, and these are guys that a lot of these guys have an ideological view of the world where they see themselves in a sort of life and death struggle with people,
I agree 100%. I mean,
yep.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is just that, I just like with everything, I see it as part of a change that the US is going through. I think it's kind of the culmination of a liberal order which has nowhere to go, so ramping up internal policing and repression, I mean, this is just the conclusion that the Democrats and Republicans have been driving us to. I mean, because if it wasn't, after Bush massively expanded and centralized the national security state, then Obama would have had to back it off. But he didn't. He expanded it even more.
Well, can we finish this out by doing predictions for the worst thing that's going to happen to the Trump administration?
Jesus Christ.
I think the worst thing that's going to happen is that J.D. Vance is going to become president because Trump chokes on this Diet Coke cap. And then we have President J.D. Vance, which is really, really just a horrifying situation. Just sort of frightening to even think about. Also having a president that young.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to be president if you're under 70. That's my opinion.
Again, we'll see what happens when the allegations come out. Like I said last time.
Hopefully well, I mean, they can't really get rid of a vice president, right? Like,
I mean, they can't happen to Spiro Agnew.
Didn't it happen to Spiro Agnew? Oh, you're right. Yeah. How did they do that?
Maryland legend Spiro Agnew.
Yeah. But J.D. Vance isn't from Maryland, so it's unlikely that something that bad would happen to him.
Yeah, it's true.
If he was from Maryland, then he would be locked up for corruption already, probably.
That's right.
This is why they don't let people from Maryland be in those positions anymore.
Is Biden gonna pardon Eric Adams?
I hope so.
A pardon gift to all of us.
Oh my God! Wait, what if we put Eric Adams in the government? What if we made him Attorney General or something like that?
He should be ambassador to Turkey, obviously.
Right. But like how Harris said she was going to put a Republican in her cabinet, Trump can respond by putting a Democrat in his cabinet.
That's going to be
that made me so sick when she said that.
But
we could have multiple.
I really don't know, man. I fear that there's going to be something very scary with Iran. I really do think that we brushed very closely in 2020 and largely avoided it because of Trump's personal involvement, kind of like you were saying. But my belief is really that he is not going to be very much in the picture now, and there's not going to be anybody to stop the planes once they're in the air. I'm going to be honest. I think that could be pretty bad.
That is very frightening. That would be God. Yeah.
My answer is going to be a cheap escape because I think it would have happened either way. But I think we will soon have to reckon with the idea that there isn't a Palestine left, or at least not even the terrible, oppressive version there was.
No.
And I think that's going to be very, very upsetting.
When you see the guy that Israel is sending to be ambassador under Trump, it's pretty clear what they think they can get away with. So.
Yeah. And I also, in the same sort of logic of kind of this was just happening anyway, but I do think we will be able to observe a national security state that gets even worse. And as we continue our digital lives, they will only get more invasive in them as using them as ways to surveil on all of us. But again, I just can't quantify how much worse that will be under Trump, if at all.
Well, as the listeners see, a lot of haters here, a lot of downers who want America to fail. No one who supports President Trump's agenda to make America great again, and that's sad to see. That's probably the biggest challenge for President-elect Trump is how to motivate the youth
sickness
like
in
us.
This country.
Yeah, exactly. The haters and losers. What to do about them? I can't wait to see what he does. Thanks for listening.
La France est une chose, à mes yeux, très considérable. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. Je veux dire par là qu'à mon sens, elle est quelque chose de très grand. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. Il y a même là quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Je me fais en effet de la France une certaine idée. qu'elle soit la France.